The most widely published book in human history reveals that we are created in the image of God. Throughout our human journey, each encounter is an opportunity to see the shared humanity in ourselves and others. Regardless of one's views on religion, each experience and each story weaves us together towards a common path. A path of transformation, a process of growth and understanding, a recognition that, at our core, we share a common destiny. What does the search for truth really mean in our lives? How can we find a sense of unity in a world so diverse and divided? As we reflect on these questions, we start to uncover a fundamental connection that binds us all beyond our differences. Welcome to Created in the Image of God, Building Vibrant Communities, with our host, Wade Franson. Tonight's episode is Truth, Fiction, and the Newsroom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Created in the Image of God. I'm calling in from a very cold Wisconsin. Perhaps you hear it a little bit in my voice, having been out dealing with firewood, keeping the chickens alive. And we've had 20 below weather, and it's slowly warming up. By the way, the 20 below weather feels like 47 below. And my kids got some time off school, which they were very happy about. They did not like hearing Dad tell them that this is not as bad as it was when I lived in the tent in Alaska my senior year, and it was 20 below. And they have it so nice, so cushy in this nice warm house. I hope that you are calling in from someplace warm and comfortable tonight. And I bring the tent in there to add a little human drama because our guest tonight is going to bring a little bit of that in terms of how he applies human drama to the work that he's now doing. It's a very distinguished gentleman with a wonderful, diverse career. His name is John DeDakis, and I hope that I pronounced it right. He'll let me know. John DeDakis, an award-winning novelist, journalist, and writing coach, 45 years in this space. Part of it includes serving as a White House correspondent for a presidential candidate during the time that his boss was running for president. That man was Pat Robertson, who you may know as a leading contender to have a religious person featured in the White House. And John was a member or working for the Christian Broadcasting Network at that time. Afterwards, he then went to work for CNN, where he had a distinguished career working with many people, including Wolf Blitzer, who many of you may know. But his focus in recent years has been writing mystery thriller novels. And we talked about that a little bit leading up to the preparation for the show, but let's dive right into it now and allow me to introduce John to you.
Hi, Wade.
Welcome to the studio, John. Did I get the pronunciation close enough this time?
You nailed it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I've been really looking forward to this. We've had several conversations in preparation to figure out exactly what the angle here is for my audience. But like we always do, let's let them discover for themselves your backstory, your creation story. Don't embellish. We don't want fiction at this point. Share with us who your parents were and the circumstances and forces that shaped you as a young boy.
Oh, that's nice. I don't get a chance to talk about my parents. My mom and dad, I grew up in La Crosse, Wisconsin, along the Mississippi River. I know you're near Madison. Let's see. My dad was born in Greece. He was born in Athens, Greece, came over to the U.S. when he was 6 years old. Grew up in Chicago, met my mom at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin, Camp McCoy at the time. My mom grew up in La Crosse. She was an elementary school teacher at Franklin School. My dad was a lawyer, and the plan was I was going to go into practice with him and then go into politics. And if everything had turned out the way I had intended, I would have been the guy sworn in on the Capitol steps in 2008 instead of that guy from Kenya or wherever Trump says he's from.
And by mentioning Trump, you're actually referring to President Obama, right?
Well, I'm referring. I mean, I'm referring to Obama, who was elected in
exactly
2008. But
exactly.
But Trump had the big lie about where Obama was born.
I've had a lot of coffee, but it's a little bit later. I wanted to make sure that I had followed that. So Interestingly, when we talk about Wisconsin and we talk about politics, you probably are fully aware, but a lot of people don't know that there was this recall action of the governor, Scott Walker. And during that whole period, I can't remember the exact details, the state senators fled the state to avoid voting on something. And then there was the recall, and there was a whole lot of drama, and there was a whole lot of national attention in Wisconsin that seemed like some kind of warm-up act for the polarizing politics which would follow. I don't want to get into that right now, but I'm going to put a pin in it, but we're going to come back to it because I want to know a little bit more about your backstory. So you didn't follow in your father's footsteps into the legal field.
Right.
But where did you get your education, and how did you end up with Christian Broadcasting Network and so on and so forth?
Fair enough. I went to the University of Wisconsin in Madison, starting in 1968. And the Vietnam War was a big deal back then. It was in all the papers. They had a draft, which means that if you had a number below 150, you were going to Vietnam. My number was 14, which didn't look good, but I had a student deferment. And the thing that made the transition from law to from law to journalism was that I kept getting spun from both the left and the right on the war. And I just knew that whoever was trying to spin me was leaving something out that was a salient detail that undermined their position. And so I volunteered at a campus radio station and got tear gassed while covering an anti-war riot after Kent State in May of 1970. My parents heard their little boy getting tear gassed on the radio, and they suggested that I should transfer to UW-La Crosse, which I did. But my grade point average was 1.95. UW had been voted the #1 party school in the country by Playboy magazine, and it was my goal to be the #1 partier. I was so good at it that I almost flunked out. And so when I transferred, I lost my student deferment, and I was basically going to have to go into the Army. Enlisted to avoid the draft, got orders to Vietnam, and 2 weeks before I was to ship out, my orders were changed to Germany. I spent 2.5 years at the headquarters of the American Forces Radio and Television Network in Frankfurt, Germany. But the first interview I did was with Alfred Hitchcock. And that was one of those pivotal moments where I
That was
discovered,
a tough war assignment,
I'm
man.
telling you, and that's when I got, the real journalism bug. So when I got back to UW after the Army, I got my degree in journalism, worked at WMTV, the NBC affiliate in Madison, and then got hired by the Christian Broadcasting Network in 1983, I think it was, because Channel 15, I had a desire to do more in-depth reporting, and CBN, they have the 700 Club, and they had a new news division where they did more in-depth reporting. And by that time, I was an evangelical, and so that seemed like a pretty good fit.
So let's backtrack, rewind the tape a little bit, and follow and find the thread that led to the religious component, the evangelical. So what was your family's religious background? Your father from Greece, your mother, a Wisconsinite, and how did that work out in terms of
my dad was raised Greek Orthodox. My mom was German Lutheran, and so when they married, they compromised and became Episcopalians because they were both liturgical, and they did it that way. And of course, it was sort of a mixed marriage because my dad was an immigrant, and I can remember my aunt, when my mom said that, she was going to marry my dad, she said, "Well, Ruth, the children will be colored." And my mom goes, "Yeah, so."
Wow.
I know, back in the day. So I was raised Episcopalian. My parents were pillars of the church. My dad was on the vestry. My mom taught Sunday school. I was in church every Sunday. Actually did teach Sunday school for a bit. But UW-Madison, that's a whole different ball of wax. And, I was out from under their thumb and was definitely living the hedonistic life. But I was coming face to face with my own hedonism, and I was realizing that it was causing a problem for other people. I was hurting other people because of my selfishness. And at this point, Campus Crusade was making a pitch on campus. They had the 4 spiritual laws, and I was receptive. It was a very simple way of looking at the gospel, and things clicked and it made sense. And so I made a commitment, but I still didn't really know what that meant. And it took another 2 years. And it wasn't until I was in the Army. My roommate was an evangelical, and he was with a group called the Navigators, which is another campus organization. It's very legalistic, very much into scripture memory. And so, when you're in the Army in Germany, it's either beer, drugs, sex, or Jesus. I chose Jesus, and so it was a stabilizing influence. And so for a long time, I considered myself an evangelical, although I did go to an Episcopal church.
What were those 4 spiritual pillars? I'm just curious.
4 spiritual laws, if I remember: God loves you and has a wonderful plan for your life. We are all sinners and fall short of the glory of God. However, Jesus paid the price for our sins. He died for our sins, and if we receive him, he basically, I think they quote scripture saying, "I stand at the door and knock." And if you open the door, I will come in and have a relationship with you. And so when a person receives Jesus, they are covered. They are fit for heaven, not because of their own goodness, but because of Jesus's perfection and the sacrifice that he paid. And so that's pretty much it. And then we can grow spiritually and have, I don't know, a sort of a spiritual stability, I guess you can say, going forward. It's as best as I can remember it.
No, that's great. Thank you for unpacking that a little bit. So did that play into your decision to apply at CBN?
It did, and I think that I was a pretty outspoken evangelical when I was at Channel 15, and someone suggested, "Oh, you'd be a good fit for CBN." I had no idea what CBN was, and I looked at the 700 Club and was impressed. And one of my buddies in the Army, I remembered, had worked at CBN as an announcer. And so when I applied for the job, I purposely went there as a journalist. And so I took all the God words out of my query letter, out of my resume, and of course I was rejected, bam, like that. But it was the same day that I called my friend at the network, and it turns out he wasn't just an announcer. He was Mike Little, who was the executive vice president in charge of the news division. And so he said, "Well, it sounds like personnel is not using very good judgment," because Mike knew my work. And so, long story short, they brought me to Virginia Beach. I interviewed with Mike and Terry Heaton, who was the executive producer of the 700 Club, and I got hired.
Well, I was in a parallel universe at that time. I was getting my degree, my undergrad degree, Bachelor of Arts, with a major in theology in the early 80s. And at the end of that time, my junior year, there was a gentleman, his name was David Hume. He was the director of communications and public affairs for the global denomination. He handled most of certain kinds of marketing. We were running campaigns globally in Reader's Digest, among other things. We had the #1 rated religious TV show. 700 Club. For a while there in the early 80s, we'd had a legacy of same on radio. And I was selected to be his administrative assistant from all the students there. And it was partially because of my foreign language experience and my, I don't know, just audaciousness. And this gentleman from England thought, well, this would be an interesting one. So I worked for him for a year. And then I ended up going to Germany and starting in media and in Switzerland and behind the Iron Curtain, and then I was ordained. So, that's what I was doing during that time where you were.
Wow.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So a lot of similarity there in our experiences, although mine nowhere near, at the level of yours. And I'm honored to have you here and have that insight. So as the last sort of part of this segment, before we go to a quick commercial break, tell us a little bit of what it was like working for Pat Robertson at that time of his presidential run.
Yeah, I got there in 83 and he started flirting with running for president in 85. And that caused a lot of consternation within the network, because there were a lot of people who felt that to go into politics was really kind of polluting the Christian message. I think one of my friends said that he's giving up his spiritual birthright for a mess of political pottage, which is sort of, taking scripture and turning it around a little bit. And of course, the show I worked on, the 700 Club, for the first half hour, it was news. It was sort of patterned after Nightline, where we would do an in-depth story on a topic of interest. And I would do like a piece of about maybe 12 minutes long, which is like an eternity in television at the time. And then it was supplemented with usually a live interview with someone, or maybe even a debate situation. And then Pat would analyze the news as well. And of course, his dad had been a U.S. senator. Pat not only was a lawyer, but also was an ordained Baptist minister. So, he had a lot of chops, was very interested in what was going on. And of course, look, it was a conservative organization. And, they felt that the mainstream news media was liberal. And so they were going to be conservative. And my argument to my fellow CBNers was, no, two wrongs don't make a right. You need to play it straight. What are the facts? And, our job is to inform, not persuade. And so Mike Patrick, who was my boss, usually assigned me to do the stories on media bias, because he knew I'd do a fair job on it.
So obviously you were at the epicenter of something.
Yeah.
What's your take on what has developed since?
Oh my God.
Well, actually, hold that thought. We're going to go to a commercial break that may lead to the next segment, right? So for the guests, it's about to get interesting. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more with John DeDakis here on Created in the Image of God. If I can get the tech working, here we go.
I went through grief counseling. And if you've never gone through counseling, I highly recommend it, because it's a great way to move toward the pain.
Probably about 5 months into the conversation, I said to my grief counselor, there's something I really need to tell you. And the only two people I've ever told this to are dead. And she flinched, and I said, that's not why they're dead.
I've discovered that in our society, we tend to anesthetize the pain. And pain and loss are universal. We all have experienced it to one degree or another. And so it's just a matter of realizing that you're not alone. And whatever it is that you might be writing about that's really personal and painful, chances are someone else is going to be able to relate to it. And so if you can move toward the pain and mine it, your writing will not only resonate with other people, but I think it will, to a certain extent, enhance emotional healing. Because one of the things I teach my students is the better you know yourself as a person, the better your writing will be. Because good writing includes the whole person. When I was in the Army, my first sergeant called me DeDakis. And I said to him, dude, I didn't say dude, but I said, it's DeDakis. And he said, that's what I said, DeDakis. The good thing is, I know who I am.
So as we progress in tonight's show, we'll get into that writing and some of the stuff that you're doing, even out in my neck of the woods. But I don't want to jump over this very loaded question I had right before the break, which was your take on what has developed since that time when you were invited or encouraged or asked to take a more, I'm not going to say partisan, but a more biased, stance to try to appeal to a certain audience segment over others with the way in which the information was being presented.
Right. Well, I mean, arguably CBN News was sort of a precursor of Fox News, and we have come a long way since then. Of course, back in the late '80s, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have cable news, all of those kinds of things. So things have changed tremendously, and we are now at a point where, as far as broadcast journalism is concerned, it's siloed. You've got MSNBC, you've got CNN, you've got Fox, and, to a certain extent, people go to their silos, to have their opinions reinforced. And what's troubling to me as well is the evangelical infatuation with Trump. I mean, he has no moral core. I'm sorry, and I'm not even being partisan when I say this. I think it's objectively obvious that he is just totally out for himself. And if lying is the way you do that, you do it. And we're seeing it right now in the way the Department of Homeland Security is describing the shootings in Minneapolis. Our own eyes show us what actually happened, and they are still doubling down on the big lie that these people were attacking police, and it's just one example of what's happened. And I think that, and I don't want to go on too long about this. I want you to have a chance to follow up. But I mean, I broke with the evangelicals when they went for Trump. That's not my brand of Christianity, of being cruel, to people, to being to being dishonest about things in order to gain power. I'm just very troubled. That's not the brand of Christianity that resonates with me.
Well, we would certainly agree on two things: that religion and also journalism, right, needs to follow the basic ethical standards, as should politicians, right?
Sure.
What comes to mind as you were talking was actually the Roman Colosseum. Now, I'm surely not the first one who would have made this particular analogy. Certainly the Roman Colosseum, and is America going the way of Rome? That's been a topic for many, many decades. It was probably a topic when Pat Robertson was running for president, right? That we were, becoming like Rome. It was certainly in my religious sphere, but this is a little different. The reason the Colosseum came to mind is how you want to put up your champion. You want to put up your champion in some kind of dramatic battle for public consumption
in the arena.
And you want to see your champion win. And so the popularity of broadcast networks in particular would seem to have that element. Is that fair?
Oh, sure. I think so. I mean, it's all about ratings and clicks and all that kind of stuff. So absolutely.
So your champion has to win on the show that you want to watch. So
absolutely.
Whatever the issue is, you have to portray your champion as winning and winning morally, right? Being right.
Or being perceived as moral or patriotic or whatever.
Right, exactly.
And it really, it's we can no longer have common ground. It is considered traitorous to in any way negotiate with the Democrats.
Well, and I would say the reverse is equally true. If perhaps
no, I wouldn't say it's equally true. I think that there are strands there who are political purists who feel it's got to be our way. But I think that it's far more on the right, where they are consider it's treasonous to work with the other side. Don't think it's equal.
All right. So moving on, I don't want to get into a debate with you on that for sure. There's a a lot of perception.
Sure.
What I do want to get into, though, is how would one come to an objective assessment of that? Because one of the things we promote on this show is the independent investigation of truth and reality, right? Whether it's through religion, whether it's through science, religion being, well, let's look objectively at what the writings actually say.
Mhm.
Let's not get caught up in the doctrinal interpretation that may have become dogma over the years. I'm trained in going back to the source material, the Bible, the Word of God itself, not
Mhm.
necessarily even the early church fathers who made decisions and determinations about what that says 1,000 years ago. You follow me? So,
Uh-huh.
how does one, look at the newsroom as a source of is journalism, is the newspaper, is TV news mirroring back reality for us? And if not, how do we sort through that?
Well, I mean, that's such an important question to explore. And as I say, journalism has evolved over time. And of course, they always say that in war, the first victim is truth. And so journalism, I think, has gone through a lot of problems. But one of the things that I think uh, it's been technology that has always been what has advanced journalism. And so we now no longer have to entirely depend on some reporter on the scene writing it down. Now we have not only, audio tape, but, we can see things live as they happen. And, now that everyone has a cell phone with a camera on it, so there is much more of an opportunity to actually see an event as opposed to have it being filtered through a reporter. The problem now, though, is with AI, you've got the possibility of deep fakes and, again, images being manipulated and changed. So, we're never going to be out of the woods completely. There's always going to be somebody who's going to be manipulating reality and trying to bend the truth. But I think now more than ever, we're able to have an opportunity to see things. I mean, my mom, back in the day, she loved watching C-SPAN because, it wasn't filtered. You were seeing the hearing in its totality. The problem is not everybody has that kind of time. She was retired. And so we still do depend on reporters to report and try
Well,
to faithfully get the story.
yeah. And speaking of time, there are a couple of elements there, because what I've said about particularly the events in Minneapolis, and I don't want to go deep in it, but I do want to broaden it out a little bit. And that is that today, because we do have that video reporting, somebody on the scene,
Several people on the scene.
Sure, but each one is an individual video. Multiple people, but somebody on the scene takes a video, and it's a certain segment of time, and it's a certain perspective, and that's presented, and people watch that video, and within 15 seconds they form a judgment.
Yeah.
And then people start making comments about that judgment one way or the other, right? And then politicians make statements that they should not be making. Clearly, the truth from my perspective is there's a broad series of events leading up to it. When this stuff goes to trial, as it should,
Probably won't.
as it should, if it goes to trial as it should, then we know from trials there's evidence and any event like this, the evidence has to be presented, and the actual judge will do a whole lot more than watch a 15-second video.
Sure.
My point being, large numbers of people are jumping to judgments based on sound bites and TikTok style videos, right?
Mm-hmm.
And large numbers of people are being swayed in their opinions, and they're taking action in new and different ways. I'll go ahead and I'm going to bring in one comment here that came in. We normally keep these to the end, but this is just so spot on. You know what's wild is that the whole world can see live events, something in the Bible that was never possible before, never possible really in human history.
Right.
And here we are in this age where, wow, the swings and the sways and the amplification from that seed that you talked about in the newsroom, where you resisted the temptation of your organization to drive audience growth and loyalty through a certain narrative. And this is where we've now ended up.
Right. Yeah. And let's look at, we don't need to go deep into the Minneapolis thing, but let's just think about it. You know, if we did not have, you know, all those cameras on the scene, reporters would have had to depend on eyewitness accounts, which can often be, you know, it happens so fast and it's over, you know, people see different things. And so we would have primarily been stuck with the official report, which was the guy was brandishing a weapon and he was attacking police and he was out to massacre them. And the video does not show that. And so that would have been the official account, and that would have been the truth.
The video also doesn't show, you know, the 15, 30, 45, 3 hours of events leading up to it. 15 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. I don't know. I haven't dug into it. You follow me as in terms of what those men on the ground were actually dealing with and why this event was even happening. It's not my particular job to report on that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So I'm not interested per se in forming an opinion on that incident. You follow me? That's why I said I don't want to go deep on any one incident. Yeah. In as much as I don't want to, you know, talk about January 6th and that thing either, you know, whatever, or the Black Lives Matter protest. I'm not the one to even know enough detail to have an opinion on it. I'm coming on the fact that we set ourselves up as judge, jury, and hangman based on a 15-second video these days in large numbers.
Well, I mean, January 6th was more than 15 seconds.
Sure.
There's a lot more video out there than 15 seconds. And if you don't have an opinion on, if you don't have an opinion on January 6th by now, I'm going to pray for you.
Well, I actually had a guest on the show who was one of the first people indicted and who was pardoned, right?
Yeah, well, they all were.
Well, yes, but I had one of them on the show, and you could go back and watch that episode where there was a video of a woman being pushed down the stairs, and this man, because of a video of him raising his hand and interacting with that woman, this man was accused of being responsible for her, and that's why he in particular ended up in prison. During his trial, it came out that there was a video from another angle with timestamps that showed that this woman actually, whether she fell or pushed or stumbled, went down the stairs 45 seconds after that. Mm-hmm. And that event was because she had his phone, which was confiscated, and he was asking her for it back. And she raised her thing because he was too close to her, and he did that. Mm-hmm. And then 45 seconds later, she ended up tumbling down the stairs, pushed, shoved in that melee. Mm-hmm. Her arm was broken or something. I don't know the specific details. He was accused of, you know, whatever, assault or I don't know exactly the accusation. But this came out in the trial. And it came out because, to your point, one of the videos from there were multiple videos, and then the judge determined, and therefore he was given leniency mm-hmm. in his sentencing, mm-hmm. right? But again, everyone who saw the initial video, and he was a celebrated person of interest at the beginning and even in the whole investigation, because he supposedly assaulted this police woman, which never happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it was probably not a bench trial. It was probably a jury, right?
It did eventually get, this trial went to jury.
Yeah. And I've been the foreperson on a couple of juries, and you can sit there for a whole week. You don't get a chance to talk to each other about the trial, and so you're just kind of processing things, and you get into the jury deliberation room, and everybody has a chance to give their opinion. And I can remember thinking, were you guys even in the same room I was in? Where were you? And so that it was juries are fascinating because they're called judges of the facts. And I did a documentary on it that won an award from the ABA. And the jury system is incredibly fascinating as a way of determining what the truth is. It's not perfect, but it's fascinating.
Well, absolutely, and nor is the whole legal system in America or the political process or anything about America perfect.
Absolutely.
My point is simply that this mass judgment based on short videos and everyone really becoming invested.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of a situation. I've shared this before. When I was in Leningrad, at the time Gorbachev was abducted, or shortly after he was abducted. Right, Gorbachev was abducted in this attempted coup. I was coming in from Leningrad while tanks were on their way from Moscow. Now, this trip had been planned. There was a team of people working with Radio TV Leningrad, and I was a minister in Germany. I was up in Sweden on vacation, and the plan was at the end of that week, I was going to drive in with some supplies and provide moral support for this team that had been there for a year. But while I was in Sweden, this coup happened, and I was told not to go in. This was pre-internet, and I asked, are those people being pulled out? And I was told, no, they're staying there. They've been there a year. They don't want to just abandon their associates. They were working on bringing in Western-style programming to Radio TV Leningrad. We had been doing work behind the Iron Curtain. I, in particular, had brought a group of 180 people into Poland during this thing called the Feast of Tabernacles to worship illegally behind the Iron Curtain, right, with the blessing of the Polish tourist agency Polarized that wanted the valuta. And we were doing this in Czechoslovakia as well. It was 1985 when that happened, right? Now the wall had come down. So I said, we're going in anyway. So here I am going into Leningrad. Tanks are coming. They stopped outside of Leningrad, St. Petersburg, the whole Yeltsin thing, you might recall. And they laid down their arms and said, we're not opening fire on our citizens. And the coup was over. Mm-hmm. The point of this story is, while I was then there actually talking to these young Western-oriented people, I was shocked to hear them say, in this time of crisis, these satellite nations of Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia, they will return to Mother Russia. Really? Really? How? And it boggled my mind how they could believe that somehow there wasn't this deep, intense hatred, and there's, they would all rather die than rejoin the Soviet Union, particularly Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia. And I had been to Estonia. I became the first pastor of the church in Estonia for our church during all this time, and I'd been studying Russian. The point is this: the reason these young Western-oriented people, guys, believed this is they were invested in their system. So these beliefs get formed, and people cannot judge the facts objectively.
That's right.
It's hard to break. And these echo chambers do not allow any objective investigation of the facts.
Right. Yeah. I mean, QAnon is probably a perfect example of that. I mean, we're talking way down the rabbit hole. It's frightening, the delusions that people are willing to believe. And it's frightening.
Well, but I believe this is happening on both sides of the issue, with the polarization and the echo chambers.
Yeah.
Apparently your opinion on that is different, which is totally fine.
I just don't, I know that there's an extreme left wing. And so, sure, there can be some delusion over there. But I think that, I feel that the Republican Party has become a cult. It's a cult. They cannot stand up to Trump. They're afraid of him. They are totally cowed. And, they'll say whatever he wants, jump as high as he wants them to. It's frightening. It's a cult. They're brainwashed.
And this was not happening under the former president,
No,
in which
no.
most of those on the other side understood that his mental capacity was seriously impaired, and yet
There was some cover-ups going on,
and yet there was complete denial.
Oh yeah, I mean,
in the media. But do you not see that it's really the same thing?
Hold it. There was not complete denial in the media because they were reporting it. They weren't reporting it as like, relentlessly every day. But I mean, even late night comics were joking about, Biden's doddering,
Late night comics are not reporting. I mean, late night
Well,
comics.
no, but I mean, the point is, how did they know about this if they hadn't seen it and report?
Well, it was obvious. It was obvious to anyone with eyes and ears.
But who's reporting on Trump's moral and mental decline?
That has been relentlessly reported again by one side.
I don't know. He's incoherent sometimes.
Well, but that has been relentlessly reported since before 2016.
I'd like to see them do some stories on invoking Article or Amendment 25 to replace him.
But you're asking for the supporters to report on that, and that's not going to happen.
Exactly.
Right. But that was also not happening. When Biden was
it was not happening.
That's my point. So if you take a step back and you look, hopefully from the center at both sides, they're doing very similar things for very similar reasons. Which is to
I can
gain the popularity and the power of whoever their champion is in the Coliseum.
Sure. Yeah, I think we need not quibble about that because your point is well taken. There are certainly
because I was wondering if I was maybe delusional. I was honestly wanting to sort of question my perception on these sides. Right?
You're not just making that up.
Thank you. So then tell us in the remainder of this segment, tell us, because obviously I'm impressed by your approach to all this and your ability to, stress the importance of that neutrality, that objectivity, and even to say, oh, you know what? I now see what you're saying. I get that. And you're not wrong. This is great, right? So what advice do you have to the viewers on this particular topic before we move on into the next segment?
Fair enough. I was at a writers' conference once, and there was a woman who shook her finger at me, and she said, "You're nothing but fake news." And I asked her, "Where do you get your news?" And she said, "Breitbart." And my jaw dropped because they make it up. And before I could say anything, she said, "Well, I have to have my opinion reinforced." And I said, "Actually, you have to have your opinion informed, and then you can go wherever."
Well, and maybe challenged, maybe a little bit of challenge to your opinion.
Yeah. So, I mean, I go to the Associated Press, Reuters, two straight ahead wire services. New York Times, I think is reputable. NPR. The point is, I don't get my news from any of the cable networks, really. If I'm on the road, I'll have CNN on out of brand loyalty, and some of my friends are still there. But although I have friends at Fox too, for that matter.
How do you feel about organs like the Free Press? And I don't know if you've heard of Tangle. We had the founder of Tangle on the show here. It's a similar approach to Free Press where you present, this is what they are saying, this is what they are saying, and
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
And here's my personal opinion on it. And then even on my editorial staff, this person disagrees with me.
Sure. I mean, I think, there are things like that. I mean, I'm retired now, so I'm not an active journalist. And so I don't really pay attention as much as, I used to when I was being paid for it. Now I'm a citizen and I know where to go to find the facts without having to get bogged down on it 8 hours a day.
That's a great conclusion. Don't get bogged down at 8 hours a day, but figure out where to go to get the facts.
Yeah. And it's there. Responsible reporting is still being done. And, if you go to two places, Reuters and the Associated Press, you're going to come away with a good sense of what the facts are. You're not going to, are we going to talk about capital T truth? No, you're going to get a little T, small T mosaic in the tile of the mosaic.
And I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm going to go ahead and do it. So when I've been reading a variety of magazines for many decades, they include Scientific American, they include Rolling Stone magazine, they include the National Review. So one of my favorite journalists, going back to Rolling Stone, was somebody who was rabidly anti-Trump, who wrote scathing, well-received articles in the tradition of Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas. It's
Hunter Thompson.
Hunter Thompson, in the which, by the way, I read that book as a teenager, and it impacted my life. Right, I won't get into that phase. You talked about your phase at Wisconsin, University. I had my phase too. But the journalist that I'm talking about is Matt Taibbi, right?
Oh, right.
He was a flaming liberal. He wrote famously about Goldman Sachs, the giant vampire squid relentlessly sticking its blood funnel into anything that smells like money. I remember that line. And I was working for Countrywide at the time, right? And I was learning about, our wholesale lending and sucking in tons of mortgages. So I was in that world, and Matt Taibbi's reporting was unbelievable. And he was also in Russia, right? And he honed his chops, originally his journalistic chops, while in Russia. What do you think of a person like Matt Taibbi in terms of journalism, who's got his own thing on Substack and who, helped unpack the Twitter files? This is a personality who has, as a journalist, I believe, tried to, with some integrity, get at the facts.
Yeah, I'm
there are pros and cons of that as well, so I'm just curious.
I'm all for that. I mean, these are influencers, and and it's possible because of the internet, and possible because of the different tools that are available to get the word out. And so, I mean, Tara Palmieri, I worked with her at CNN. She's got her own red letter, I think it's called, and it's she has been relentless in reporting on the Epstein files. I think it's Jennifer Rubin was at the Washington Post, and she founded the Contrarian. There are a lot. Heather Cox Richardson is a Boston College professor, history professor. She writes every day about daily politics and how it relates to history. So yeah, I mean, I think that a lot of that is incredibly valuable. I follow Robert Reich. I'm not as widely read as you are probably, but there are definitely people with chops, in many cases reporting or academic chops, who are really doing an important job in putting things in perspective for us.
Thank you. A world that you have left behind. So we're going to go to a quick commercial break and talk about what's next for you. Where are you growing next? And particularly this whole thing we really haven't gotten into, which is you taking your experience in the real world in ways that few of us have had the chance to be behind the scenes, working in these places, editorial input for, major networks. But what you're doing now, we're going to get into when we come back. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more of John DeDakis.
Welcome to the Royal Falcon Foundation. Our curriculum and activities inspire and train adolescents through hands-on experiences, fostering growth and empowerment. Through immersive and challenging experiences, we shape young minds to think independently and develop their leadership skills. Our programs foster new friendships and unity, shaping young leaders to tackle real-world challenges with confidence. We believe in equipping the next generation with the skills to become leaders of tomorrow. Join us at the Royal Falcon Foundation and be part of a journey that empowers, unites, and inspires. Double your impact with our matching grant. Until the end of 2025, every tax-deductible donation to the Royal Falcon Foundation, up to $1,000, will be matched dollar for dollar. Visit our website to donate now or email info@royalfalconfoundation.org for more details. Together, we can make a greater difference.
Well, speaking of getting your facts right and misinformation, we're going to have to check into that 2005 matching grant issue, or 2025 matching grant issue. Sorry about that. But John, welcome back. And right before the break, we said we're going to talk about that next phase of your life. So where did the seeds come from for these mystery thriller stories that you then began to write? And what was it like working on that first one, et cetera?
Wow. Well, look, I never really wanted to be a novelist. That was never the plan. But when CNN, I was a writer at CNN, and within a year they made me an editor, which paid well, but it was tedious. And so I needed a creative outlet. And so I started to teach myself how to write fiction. And one of the things I discovered is that a lot of it comes from within. It's what I call the spooky power of the subconscious. And so I was doing a writing exercise as I was trying to figure out what am I going to write about a car train collision I witnessed when I was 9 years old in northern Illinois. And as I was writing down the details of this accident, I remembered a radio news report from 40 years earlier that I heard a week after the crash that killed 3 people, including a kid my age. And I remember that the story was that an infant survived. And I began to play what if? What if that kid grew up and wanted to find out more about her past? And so that was the creation of my protagonist, Lark Chadwick, who's named after Chadwick, Illinois. And so she goes into journalism. Where did I get that idea? And so all 6 novels are mystery suspense thrillers with a journalism backdrop. And I'm also drawing from personal pain and experience, not only the car train collision, but my sister's suicide and my son's death of a heroin overdose in 2011. So all of those kinds of things have, over the past 20 years, impacted the life of my protagonist, Lark, as the series unspools.
So you have a protagonist that has continued through all of the novels?
Right. You don't have to read them in order, but exactly.
Wonderful.
And so,
Wonderful.
yeah, she starts out as a college dropout, dropped out of the University of Wisconsin.
I wonder
And
where that came from.
you wonder where that came from, and goes into journalism and covers the White House. Again, where did that come from? And, and so on.
Write what you know.
Right. What you know.
So I've been meaning to ask you, because in watching that little video, and you weave trauma into your workshops,
Right.
and I didn't know where that trauma had come from, because we didn't really get into that in that first segment. So tell us a little bit about how writing was therapeutic for you in working through that trauma.
Tremendously therapeutic, and it was more cathartic than therapeutic. I think the therapy was actually sort of a byproduct. And it wasn't until I looked back over the course of the 20 years that I've been writing, and I don't think I realized just how much I was working through my grief through my novels. I mean, I went through grief counseling after my son died, and so that was a tremendously healthy, healing kind of experience. But the act of writing itself, I think, is therapeutic because, good storytelling comes from a place of authenticity. And, you want to create characters who are real. And the interesting thing about life, and you know this from your background, is that, pain and loss are universal. We have all experienced it. And it doesn't even have to be the loss of a loved one. It can be the loss of a pet or a job or a promotion or your health or your innocence. Anything can create profound feelings of loss and pain. And so because it's such a universal experience, I'm a slow learner, and I finally realized not only that's what I've been doing, but I think I can help encourage people to do it for themselves. And it doesn't mean you have to write a novel. It could be writing a poem or journaling or anything creative, which can be a way of processing that emotional turmoil.
Wow, you've just triggered a thought, an important thought for me. I love doing this show because of what Here's the thought. As you were talking about, trauma, and everyone has trauma, I was thinking, yes, that's true. And suddenly I reflected on my own children and something that I just said earlier, right? About me living in a tent in Alaska, giving my kids a hard time for complaining about, and the fact is their internal emotional landscape, just as powerful as mine was. The external triggers for that might be much more mild, viewed externally.
Mhm.
But the internal experience can be just as powerful or vivid or more so than, you know, which is not to minimize objective trauma.
Right.
Follow me? But what occurred to me is, every kid hates hearing their parents go on about how hard they had it, right? And how bad it used to be and whatnot.
Yeah.
That's a common experience, and every parent ignores it because every parent knows that it's true in the last few, decades in America in particular, that you've got it easier, right? You've got it easier than we did.
Right.
Who cares? Who cares? The internal emotional landscape can be just as powerful, and the parent who doesn't acknowledge that, as
Yeah.
I probably typically don't, is
Yeah.
not helping.
Right.
And you've just helped me realize that. So thank you.
Well, you're welcome. Totally inadvertent, but thank you.
Well, I'm just reflecting now on, okay, so you're giving me little snippets of your workshop, and these are some of the takeaways that maybe some people in your audience are taking. Of course, they're coming to learn how to write typically, right? But you're also planning to be in my neck of the woods, and you're doing a presentation at a home in Stoughton.
Well, actually, I'm going to be in La Crosse on April 24th and 25th at the Franciscan Center, leading a retreat on using writing as a way to heal. And then I'm
Wow.
going to be at the Scotland Center, which I think is an independent living facility in Stoughton, where I used to live. And they're going to be it's going to be a community-wide event. I think they're bringing in, different organizations, and I'm going to lead a workshop on writing as a way to heal. And I think I'll be speaking to the Rotary Club in Edgerton, and yeah. And it's a chance to see friends in Wisconsin too.
Well, I want to connect with you, and we talked about this. You'll get me the information. We also do this work in a facility in Middleton, also with seniors. It's more of a nursing home environment, assisted living, but it's also a rehab center. So, and there's maybe a connection to the mayor of Middleton. So we'll see what we can do there, because I definitely want to connect with you while you're here and share it with the local community here. The tagline of this show, Created in the Image of God, is building vibrant communities. And it's an honor that you'll be, right here. Stoughton is a stone's throw from where I live. So we'll work that out. How have those novels done? How have they been received? And I'm going to ask another couple of follow-up questions on the series here in a moment.
Well, John Grisham has nothing to worry about. Because there are something like 300,000 books a month that are published. So it's,
but still you're in the top 5% if they're not sinking like a rock to the bottom of the ocean.
Oh, I don't even know that. Look, it's a kick when someone who you don't know says, I read your book and I loved it, and it kept me up until 2 a.m, and what's Lark up to, and those kind of things. That means a lot. And I write not to become a bestseller or famous or anything like that. It's just that I can't not do it. And so that's what it's all about. And so it's really much more fulfilling to be a one-on-one writing coach and manuscript editor and teacher, to be able to help people who have these ideas, but they have no clue how to go about doing it, because the process feels overwhelming. And so I'm able to deconstruct it and demystify it for them.
So obviously one of your goals in writing is to create that page turner that somebody stays up half the night or all night finishing, right?
Yep.
To keep their interest. And so, this particular genre engages them intellectually and probably allows you a lot of creativity in how you create the twists and turns and the page turning effect. And there's this famous saying that, if you mention the gun above the fireplace mantle in the opening scene, that gun had better be used before the book ends, right? Weaving weaving those things together and being careful in your craft.
Yep.
But are there other things that you want people to take away? I mean, moral messages, encouragement, enlightenment. Are there other things that you try to weave in or that you think about as you're crafting these stories?
I really try to stay away from being preachy. I've found, because I'm writing as a journalist, or, journalism as the backdrop, what I've discovered is that journalism over the years has become incredibly controversial. And so, the people, it seems, with the strongest opinions about journalism are the ones who have no clue what journalists do. They've never met a reporter. They've never been in a newsroom. They don't know what it's like. And so my books give people a glimpse behind the scene as to how it's done. And I mean, these are not apologies for journalism, because journalists are human and they make mistakes and there are some bad apples. And so, I work that into my novels as well. The most recent one, Enemies Domestic, deals with abortion. Lark is pregnant by this time. She's White House press secretary, and a Tucker Carlson type reporter asks her, "Are you or are you not planning to abort your unborn child?" And that none of your business question thrusts Lark into the middle of this highly toxic and polarized political fishbowl as she's trying to figure out if she's going to be a single mom or not. And then a dictator becomes president. So I'm trying to capture real life and give people an idea of what it's like to be in a situation like that.
Do people that read it tend to react along either of these political lines, or do you try to sort of bridge that gap?
I try to bridge it, because in Enemies Domestic, which deals with abortion, I really tried to. I wanted a reader, no matter where they were on the question, to feel that their position was fairly represented. I've been on all sides of the issue, pro-choice, anti-abortion. I've covered it as a reporter. So, for most of my career, my opinions, didn't matter. My kids didn't know how I voted, but my wife and I would have, intense conversations about these things. And so, my comfort zone really is not to take a position. It's just that under the current situations, I can't help myself.
Right. Awesome. So we're gonna forego the last commercial break, and we're gonna jump right into some audience comments, because we're already a little bit over time. But with your permission and blessing, if we are we okay with
Oh, absolutely. Q&A is always the fun part.
Let me find some here.
There have been some.
Oh, there have been. So
Okay.
sometimes it's hard for me to remember, like this one here. Sorry, yesteryear 5. I don't know what it was you were saying so true to. I can only imagine I think it might be the whole polarization thing, going back to that seed of you being objective. And
we're not going to be able to. Yeah, we're not going to. Well, I don't know. I hope it doesn't get worse. I mean, I think that there are a lot of statesmen and women. I think that there are a lot of people who have the wisdom to be able to pull this back from getting worse. We are at a point where we can't agree on the facts. I don't think for a while we're going to be able to find common political ground, but I think we can find common human ground. If we talk to people on a human level, whether we agree with them or disagree with them politically, I think we can find human things in common. And I think that for the most part, I think people really have that not only capacity, but I think they have that desire.
Yeah, this one here is interesting. It was around that same time in tonight's conversation. What scares me is how narratives can be twisted. This is from Bavar 464. It can be twisted to whatever team, sadly, politically wants to do with it or say with it. And and again, if you have any semblance of objectivity, you see this going on both sides. You see people looking for an event, sometimes even trying to cause events or encouraging that they happen, or almost gleefully glad that they happened, because now we
It
can go
reinforces the narrative.
we can throw red meat or blue meat. We can rally the troops around this idea. We can pump up the vote. And I get this on my phone every day. I get spam on my phone every day, no matter how many times I declare it to be spam, from both sides. This is happening. This is happening. Call your congressman now. Dial here. Go, whatever event it is. And both sides are like, they're destroying democracy. And we had this ping pong presidency, right? Interestingly, of in and out again, which hasn't happened that many times in American history, exactly because of this ping pong effect. Someone in favor, out of favor, back in favor, based on the turmoil that's being created in society, where it used to be, we'll get to vote the bum out in 4 years.
Right. Well, and I think people are fatigued. People are really fed up with the rancor. The thing I'm concerned about, though, is that he's going to invoke the Insurrection Act and take control of the election in the midterms.
Well, but the other side proclaimed COVID to be exactly that. COVID and the mail-in ballots was the reason they claimed the election was stolen. And so now people have been trumping up, pun intended, that this is now going to happen by those who proclaim that it was done to them, right? Mm-hmm. And it's kind of funny. The seed that you talked about was two wrongs don't make a right.
Yeah.
But the hysteria, I mean, I just laugh, frankly, at the idea that however old our current president is, that he's going to try that. To me, it's laughable that anyone would believe that he would actually try it, or that it would get any traction if he did.
Let's talk in December.
We will.
Right.
But even the midterm election is likely going to diminish the capacity to prepare for such a thing, because America swings that way. And I'm not anyway, I don't on this show, we try to religiously avoid any hint of political partisanship, which is one reason why I'm pushing back a little bit to say, I see it happening on all sides personally.
Yeah. I'm just worried about what's going to happen in November.
And for the audience, if they care what I think, I don't think we have anything to worry about from the perspective of the destruction of democracy, right?
Oh man.
Personal opinion. I think we have lots to worry about.
We're in trouble. We're in deep trouble.
Okay, we do have lots to worry about as a country, I believe, but I don't believe that's one. And we'll see. We might have you back on as we get closer or past that point.
If we have free speech, then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, again, you may not have followed Matt Taibbi and the Twitter files and what was being done about free speech when the other side was in power. You follow me? And, yes, Elon Musk bought Twitter and renamed it X. But part of the reason he did that, as came out when the Twitter files were released, as was in evidence by Matt Taibbi's reporting, was massive federal involvement in controlling the narratives on Twitter. Almost unbelievable government and agency, CIA and other involvement inside Twitter, controlling what Twitter did and didn't report on.
Yeah.
So that's why I say, this has been going on, and it's not just one side.
Sure. Okay.
That's all.
Okay.
So thank you, great speller. These scenarios should be treated like sports, where they review the replays before making the calls.
Yeah.
But I guess that's what you're saying with the videos, right? We can do that.
I think this person is onto something, because that's actually something that we make a big deal in baseball and tennis and football about the replay, and they can tell within a fraction of an inch if he was out of bounds, or if the ball was on the line or whatever. And there are so many different angles, and we generally accept the results. And now we're seeing it in a crime scene, and yet people are, I suppose it's a team thing. It's
Well, that's it. Those calls are still often debated, right? That's
they,
the problem.
they are. I mean, I think I have enough experience as being objective to be able to say, yeah, I'd really like the guy to be out, but he was really in. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm able to make that call. I really am, believe it or not, still committed to the truth. I really want to know what actually happened. I mean, if this guy, if the guy who was killed in Minneapolis was really brandishing a weapon, then
the video evidence is that he clearly was not brandishing a weapon.
No, he wasn't. But that's the narrative. We're talking narrative.
Well, that was the narrative that came out. But the narrative changed after that play was
not
reviewed.
changed. The government has not changed their position.
I would politely disagree. The position is now that this happened in the fog of war, and that even though he wasn't brandishing the weapon, there was a. I'm just saying. This is.
They're not saying that. They're saying he was brandishing a weapon, but we're investigating. Right. Do I really believe your investigation is going to be objective? No, I don't. Sorry.
Interesting. I had seen talks in the last 48 hours in which that narrative was changing, but maybe I'm missing something.
Well, maybe I won't say that I've not heard that. I've heard them in one, Bovino basically said brandishing a weapon, and then when he's asked specifics, he goes, well, we're investigating. You can't have it both ways.
So this is the point, right? If it doesn't help the team the judge is on, they would never do it. They would never agree to it. But here's a follow-on question to that with this team idea. Do you think we'll ever escape the team mentality and unite? After all, we are the United States. Is that on the horizon at all?
I am an optimist for no apparent reason. I do think it's still possible. Yes.
Here's an interesting one. How you hold a theological conviction, or do you in the same way, while staying compassionate toward people who disagree?
Oh, sure.
Or have your theological convictions changed? This is a question. I'm gonna sorry to this guest. Theological conviction to me often could mean adherence to dogma, right? Adherence to a theological statement or principle. Do you retain some of the same theological convictions, or have those changed over time?
They've evolved. I am not nearly as doctrinaire as I used to be as an evangelical. I'm much more, I think, spiritual. I'm less certain about what I believe. Because
does it help with this compassion for people who disagree?
Not really. I think that at least for me, even when I was doctrinaire, I was doctrinaire about loving your neighbor and loving your enemy. And so, but there are some religions that are highly intolerant to the point where they, fly planes into buildings because, you are in the great Satan.
One more question on the topic of religion as we wind down and run out of time. There are lots of great comments and questions, by the way. Has your Christian faith influenced the themes you choose to explore in your novels? And if so, how does that show up in your characters and plot choices?
I think it does. I'd have to temper it now because I'm not as self-consciously a Christian per se. I'm not anti-Christian, but I'm open to a lot more spiritual expressions. But yes, I think that it's true that any kind of personal morality that you have and a personal view of what's right and wrong is going to manifest itself in your writing. But that doesn't mean that you're going to write, happy, wonderful books where everything, turns out wonderfully and everybody lives happily ever after. That's not life. And I've got characters who are jerks. I've got characters who are flawed. And so, that's, I don't know if that's working out my Christian faith as much as it is observing life.
Well, I'm hopeful that even as your central character may have some components of your life, that you're changing the names of the jerks that are influencing.
I'm making them up.
Other characters.
I know you've run out of time, but in Fake, there's on page 64, there's a scene where Lark is in National Cathedral awaiting the beginning of the funeral service for the First Lady. And so Lark is ruminating on right and wrong, God or no God, all that kind of stuff. And she takes issue with people who use God as a cudgel, including.
Is there a passage you'd be open to reading sort of as we conclude?
If you don't mind.
I'd love it because because here's a question as well, what's a technique to turn a dry factual detail into a compelling scene? So maybe this is going to be sort of an answer to that as well.
Oh, maybe not, but it does get into Lark's character.
Awesome.
Okay, so she's sitting in National Cathedral, listening to the organ prelude. She said, it gave me some time to relax and ruminate. I wondered yet again about God. As I've thought about the vastness of the cosmos and the complexity of even the tiniest forms of life, I've recognized an amazing symmetry that suggests to me the existence of an intelligent designer behind the universe's intricate design. But that's not proof God exists. It's only evidence. The rest is faith. My faith amounts to one mustard seed, maybe two, but not three. That's because of the events of the past few years, not to mention the past 24 hours. To be honest, my faith is tested the most by the sanctimonious, intolerant certainties of the doctrinaire extremists who use God as a cudgel. Yes, I'm talking to you, Osama bin Laden, but I'm also talking to you, Westboro Baptist Church, and your God hates fags gay bashing. When being brutally honest with my grief counselor and myself, I realized that most of the times that I pray, I'm in some kind of a jam. But lately, I'm seeing a certain gratitude emerging. I can now argue with a smidge of confidence that God not only exists, but has probably gotten me out of a lot of tight situations. Or as Lionel, my mentor, often tells me, you're smart and courageous. Or as I often reply, I'm very lucky. And those thoughts and biases were a swirl in me as I settled in for the funeral service for Rose Gannon, First Lady of the United States of America.
Nice. Thank you so much for sharing that.
That pretty much sums up where I am, I think, right now.
So obviously, whether you pronounce his name correctly, DeDakis, you can find him. You can find him on Amazon, I'm sure, for any of those books. You can go into Barnes and Nobles and buy it or order it. I'm sure it's available on order if they don't have it.
Small independent bookstores are worth.
Exactly. Wherever your friendly neighborhood bookstore can get it for you, right?
Yeah.
So we will also, as the time gets closer, probably I'll announce it. Maybe we'll run your ad again and mention to people as your time gets closer here in Wisconsin,
Sure.
Because I would love to hook up with you, have a coffee, and see what we can do to help promote your tour around the local area here in my neck of the woods.
Thank you.
John, it's been an absolute pleasure. Anything else you want to leave the audience with after tonight's discussion?
Well, just thank you, Wade, for the opportunity. I mean, you make me think, and I appreciate, what do they say? Iron sharpens iron, like one man sharpens another. And so I appreciate, that's what your show should be. One iron sharpens iron.
Well, I'm glad you haven't lost that knack way back when you were in that legalistic church where you had to memorize Bible verses, right?
Right, exactly.
That is straight out of the Proverbs, and it's one of my favorites.
It
I
is.
try to be a little bit less irony today. There's irony in that statement. I try to have a little. I try to have a little bit fewer sparks fly.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you didn't mind me pushing back a little bit.
Oh,
Clearly,
no, not at all.
we might have slightly different perspectives on things, but overall, we're saying the same thing.
I
Do
think
your
so.
independent investigation. Try to remain objective. Don't just swallow here's another quote from the Bible, same book, Proverbs, Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, according to the story. And that is, whoever brings the story first is believed.
Yeah.
Right. Another thing is they often kill the messenger, right? So,
You think? But the only other thing I'll just say is people can get an email to me through my website, they can find out about my books or my public speaking or my classes through my website, which is my name.com, JohnDeDakis.com.
no dot or anything, just John DeDakis.
JohnDeDakis.com. Right.
I have to, I just want to make absolutely certain I get the spelling of your name right. Okay. So
got it right. John, John, D as in dog, E.
Right.
D as in dog, A, KIS as in Sam.com. You've got it right on the screen there.
Right. I'm just going to portray it here at the bottom as we go out.
And it doesn't have any upper lower.
Is that it?
Let's see. John, you got it. Nicely done.
And that's now gone out to all the channels on a chat message and also here on the screen, so that anyone looking at this video, they'll instantly see it below wherever this channel is aired. So do check John out. It's been absolutely an honor and a pleasure. I only have two things left to do. The first one is our little tagline. Our closing is, "You are created in the image of God, and God loves his creation." And then the very last thing I have to do is show the sneak peek for next week. John, I know it's probably even later where you're at. If you want to hang out right after this, we can chat a little bit or not. For the audience, here's what you can look for next week on Created in the Image of God. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Wade.
Hey everyone, Wade Franson here, and it's sneak peek time for episode 218. Can't believe that. Airing on February 3rd in the new year. And I'm here with Mick Weinholt, who is a dynamic storyteller and faith-driven communicator. And we're going to have a rip-roaring show. Welcome to the studio, Mick.
Wade, pleasure. Thanks for having me here.
Well, your specialty is talking to people about stories and through the lens of faith, moving mountains and whatnot. Where and when and why do you do that?
Yeah, we do it really simply, Wade, to glorify God the Father, to bring glory to Jesus Christ, and to hear from the Holy Spirit. So it's really interesting to see these ordinary people that share these absolutely incredible stories. And then what we end up framing up for them is this opportunity for them to either say, hey, listen, that was coincidence, even though it was amazing, or that was God, even though it was amazing.
Well, part of the conundrum here for me has always been, and by the way, my audience knows I have experienced miraculous events, but I've always viewed them as for me, less about me testifying. But at the same time, I do share those stories by way of example. I don't expect necessarily other people to believe them. But it sounds like your purpose and point is to help the person themselves really dig deep into what it means for them rather than witnessing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a very, very true statement. But there is also the added benefit, Wade, of other people hearing that person's story. Because what I have seen countless times is that there is a theme and similarities across so many different stories that lots of people that haven't necessarily understood their story in a particular way and maybe have not related it to Christ can now relate it to King Jesus, having heard someone else with a similar story confess Christ related to theirs.
So for those of you who have been, ever since COVID in particular, on a steady diet of, Netflix and Amazon Prime and all of those stories, tune in for some real life, real stories with a spiritual nature. Don't miss episode 218, airing on February 3rd of Created in the Image of God. And it will be 8 p.m. Central on a YouTube station near you. We'll see you there.